Welcome to the Concealer Chronicles, everyone. I am your host, Rachel Moore, and typically I have a really awesome opener video, but of course, technology was not my friend this evening. It's taking the Wednesday off. That's okay, because we're here. And thank you for coming to the second episode of Concealer Chronicles here on our Facebook page. So happy to be with you today as we get the show cracking open here. You may be watching live or be watching the replay. Either way, I would love it if you would not mind sharing the show this evening or at any time that you're watching it, because we have a really great topic we're talking about tonight. And I'm very excited, not just about tonight's topic and our guests, but the fact that this intros the fact that we're going to be having guests on this show. And this is me talking to other women about issues that affect women, right? And really, they're universal. They affect all of us, whether directly or indirectly. And that's why I'm so excited about this evening and this show, because we're getting that rolling. So as you're watching, I also want to encourage you to tag a friend who should be watching too and who should be commenting and being able to participate in the show as well. The Concealer Chronicles, as a brief introduction, is a show that should feature and does feature the very good, the bad, and the real stories of being a woman in charge. Now, you might ask, what does that mean to be a woman in charge? It's essentially, we're in charge of everything, for one thing. But it's anything that you have some jurisdiction, some power, some experience, some authority over, and something that you can speak to. Now, we're going to have a ton of different topics throughout the range of this show and these episodes. Tonight, we're going to talk about the military ban against transgender people. We're going to talk about breast cancer next week. We're going to have a no makeup meetup at the end of this month. We're going to talk about knitting, fly fishing, entrepreneurship, marriage, parenting, not wanting to be a parent, things like that. Pretty much anything that's in the scope of being a woman in charge. Now, with that, I want to go ahead and introduce tonight's guest. I'm going to bring her onto the screen. Emily Crose is someone I actually met virtually on Twitter. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you for being on with us tonight. And I don't know what time zone you're in, actually. I don't remember if I've asked you that even.
In Eastern.
Okay, so it's late for you, and so I doubly appreciate you being on with us tonight. I scheduled the show so that, typically women from any of the United States time zones are either just getting home from work, or they might just be like, I just took the makeup off and I'm almost ready for bed, but hey, I can hang out for a half hour. So thank you for being on with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I will preface this a little bit by saying I encountered you on Twitter, which will eventually lead into tonight's topic. But I wonder if you could briefly just introduce yourself to our viewers, live and replay ones, and just let them know who you are, a little bit about your background, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, things like that.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Emily Crose. I worked in the government for 7 years. I worked in the intelligence community for different intelligence agencies. I started with the NSA back in 2010, worked for the CIA after that, and then I worked for Cyber Command after that. So my work with Cyber Command was as a U.S. Army civilian.
Okay.
Originally come from Michigan. So originally come from Michigan, met my wife there. We've been together for almost 10 years, married. Wow. So it's been a long trip.
Yeah. Whereabouts do you live now?
We live in Maryland now.
Oh, okay, great. I'm actually traveling to Maryland, next month. Going to stay with a friend who works in D.C. But I'm trying to think the last time I went through there was when I was a kid on a road trip. So it's been a while. Are you guys in the throes of fall and starting to see all that stuff happen and kind of getting into that?
I thought we were, and then we're back up into the 80s again this week. So it's manic here.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure. Do you what kind of things do you guys do for fun around there, and what are you involved with right now as far as work and play and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So we have 2 kids, so most of my free time is either spent chasing kids around, or I've recently got a new project that I've been working on that I'm pretty excited about. So I've been spending a lot of my time doing that.
Yeah. And how old are your kids, if you don't mind sharing that? You can be kind of broad, because I know it's live streaming in public. So
Yeah, so my son is going to be, well, he just turned 4, and my daughter just turned 1.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that too. I have some older kids. Mine are 11, and my daughter would say she's practically 9. She's not practically.
Basically.
Yeah, she's basically 9. I'm like, well, in that case, I'm practically a size 6. So that's
Sure.
how that works, which it doesn't. It does not work at all. I really find it interesting too, and we're going to talk about this, how this correlates to tonight's topic. So you worked in, you worked in intelligence, which I
Yeah.
always find really fascinating. I've actually met some people when they tell me that, and I had no clue that they did. Can you tell a little bit about what that work is like and being part of that community?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, being a part of the intelligence community is its own thing. You're very much engrossed in a world that most people don't get to be involved in. So it's interesting. It's something I always wanted to do, and I finally made it to that world and lived the life, and I'm done with it, thankfully. Thankfully through with that part of my life and moving on.
Right. Did you now as far as did you work directly with any particular branch of the military, or was it kind of just, did it tie in with the military, or was you were just kind of, I really don't understand. I'm coming from a
Yeah,
totally
sure.
nonsensical area.
Yeah, so I was hired as a U.S. Army civilian.
Okay.
So my job was to work in conjunction with the uniformed Army enlistees and officers.
Mm-hmm.
So the work then gets shared, especially depending on what kind of mission you're on. So in my mission, I was working with every different branch. I was any given day I might be talking to a person in the Navy or one of the Marines or Air Force. So anybody could walk in and I could start working with them. It's really just a matter of who's on shift that day.
Right. Right. So yeah, it sounds like I can't imagine that lifestyle must be just insane, because you are working basically with your hands in the middle of a ton of sensitive information, and having to have the not only the tech savvy but also the judgment of knowing where that stuff's supposed to go, how it's supposed to be
Yep.
used. And I just started a job for the government too, and that's not even security, but I know all the regulations are
Yeah.
numerous, so it can get a
Yes.
bit of a big responsibility for that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into it, because the reason I met you on Twitter was because this all basically started on Twitter, as many things are lately. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the picture. And I'll put this up just on the solo screen. So this was back in July. So a series of tweets went out by our commander-in-chief, and he basically announced on Twitter that there would be a new ban preventing transgender people from serving in the military. There were many, justifications given for that, around cost, and, we need to focus on readiness. And he goes on that picture, decisive and overwhelming, ... whatever. So obviously that was, that rolled out on Twitter. And naturally, as happens with those kind of announcements, the world basically threw back our heads and howled in various states of reaction.
Yeah.
I don't know if you mind sharing what your reaction is. I'll share mine too, but I find yours to be particularly pertinent considering your background and who you are. So would you mind talking a little bit about how you reacted when you first saw that?
Yeah, sure. Oh, well, so yeah, obviously it was negative. There was a part to that. I think it was like 3 tweets right in a row. One of them said something about trans people being a burden, and that I think that was the one that really particularly hit me and others pretty hard, because I worked the job
Mm-hmm.
every day. I go to work. I do my work. I always got high ratings. There was never a problem with my work. I was always on the ball. I was with it. I didn't have any issue. I mean, I don't think of myself as a burden, but that's the perception, and that's the perception that our president now is resting his reputation on, that transgender people are a burden. So my reaction was, there are a lot of people in the military, uniformed military in particular, who work really hard, and we should appreciate anybody who's willing to put their life on the line for that job. But then to just disrespect a group of people like that is just it's just sad and ignorant, and Yeah, that's mostly how I felt when I saw that.
Yeah, and I will say, I'll actually put your Twitter account up too, just because I feel like you're being quite a, for me, and I followed you since I saw you. I tend to I go to Twitter for my breaking news. I go to observe certain accounts that I choose not to follow, but I observe because I feel like it's, better to be informed of what's going on out there. And obviously
Sure.
that series of tweets went out, and that's really where I lived for a little bit because I just I needed to participate and see what people were saying and reactions, and please let this, let's hear from some voices of reason about this. But and that's where I encountered you. I saw a tweet from you saying you were ready to talk about this. And, one reason I wanted to get this show going, and I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but I've mentioned to people where the show came from. Gary Vaynerchuk is a guy who always talks about the hustle, and he's just always, he persists in having these, he has these dark circles under his eyes all the time. And I was always like, well, I am hustling. We're all hustling. We may not, but women often feel like for whatever reason, we have to hide that kind of thing and hide what we're doing. But I don't want to do that anymore. I feel like it's important to talk about these issues to, raise awareness. And my gosh, if there's ever a time to talk about why this matters right now, I would think it would be about this issue. This is completely a civil rights issue. It's an equality issue. It's an access issue. I mean, it's a human issue. And to treat it as anything like, oh, it's just a budget consideration or that there's some kind of thing going on there is not correct. So I appreciate that you're tweeting quite vocally about it and just kind of trying to be a voice amongst all the noise to say that this isn't right and it's not something we should tolerate.
And so I speak because other people can't speak. So there, as I'm sure you know, there are limitations, legal limitations on people who work for the government that say that it's very strict rules about what you can and can't do and what you can and can't say about public politicians. It doesn't disavow criticism of all forms, but there's definitely limitations that other people have to live by, which I don't anymore. So yay me.
Right. Well, and to be able to use your platform and voice for that, knowing that they can't say anything, they're probably looking at you saying, thank you, thank goodness somebody else is out there speaking on behalf of me. Since that, well, and it was basically a tweet, right? It wasn't actually policy had been developed or anything. It seemed like, from what the news reports were saying, a lot of the government or military higher ups were taken by surprise. Like, okay, whatever, we got to roll with this, I guess. But they weren't. Can you talk a little bit about, and again, you got a little more insight into this too, just being part of it. What was the ripple effect like? How did that start like happening through the military ranks, and kind of where are we now?
Oh, so yeah, I only have secondhand accounts kind of what happened, and just whatever I can figure out from the crazy tweets that come out. So the initial reaction, and I wrote a few things on this initially, the initial reaction from a lot of the people who I know who are uniformed military, transgender, said they felt like they had been, that they were sheeps led to the slaughter. So they had been sort of lured to come out and, be public with their gender identity, and then suddenly have the door slammed in their face.
Yeah.
So it's not a fantastic situation to be in for these people right now, because they're kind of having to compensate for this very chaotic environment that they find themselves in right now. And frankly, that's not great for the military. The military doesn't work great when there's information that requires to have no distance. So that's the first part of your question, I think. Second part of your question, where are we now?
Yeah.
Still pretty vague. So a lot of the rationale that the president was using in order to reinstitute this ban has since turned out to be pretty flimsy. So especially things like, how much is this going to cost us? So the initial cost estimate was something like $8.6 million just for the cost of covering the medical needs for transgender people.
Right.
It turns out reinstituting the ban is going to cost something like $960 million. And, you know, I'm not in business. Apparently our president is, but that doesn't seem like a great trade to me. So that's kind of the status of things. We're looking at a 6-month review, which former General Mattis, Secretary of Defense Mattis, is going to be doing now. Who knows what he's going to come up with? I mean, the whole basis of this, which we already had answers to, there's not going to affect unit cohesion or lethality or any of these other buzzwords that the military tends to use in order to describe its effectiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see, I think it was just yesterday on Twitter, that there is a bipartisan amendment to the budgets bill that is trying to actually prevent any kind of ban against transgender people, you know, that Trump is trying to institute. And that's just a recent, I mean, that was yesterday. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I don't know. You probably can't predict anything, but do you have any hope that it's going to turn into nothing, or are you a little more like, well, God, we're just on the first 8 months of this administration. How good or bad can it get? Right? I guess I'd just love to know. What do you think?
Really try and be optimistic about this sort of thing. So amending the NDAA, which is what you're referring to, the National Defense Authorities Act, is a pretty good. It kind of falls in line with what I'm seeing in a lot of other government policy type of stuff that's going down. So like the president is making these threats to things like DACA, and I'm just going to get rid of DACA now. And that's sort of like very uncommittal attitude about certain issues that are very important to a lot of people ends up kind of getting thrown to Congress to just kind of get their act together and do something, which I think ultimately does become productive. Like that's about as close to a compliment as you're going to get from me about this whole situation. But that's the optimism speaking here. I think that it's a good way to proceed, but I don't know what kind of support Congress has for it. They seem to be supportive, but it's stuff like this is so up in the air with those guys. I just don't even, I don't know what odds to put on it, to be honest.
I share that. I tend to be an optimist, but I'm also a realist. And so I do try to see the rainbows like, oh gosh, the better angels could overcome. But then we're just people and they're just Congress, and look at them, you know, and it's just been messed up for so long. And I'm just speaking of that from a total place of privilege. You know, I'm not even being directly impacted by many of the policies that the administration is either trying to roll out or roll back. But that's why it's so key. And again, I really appreciate you being so forthright to come on and talk about this, because I feel like it can get very easy for us in our silos, being very myopic and like, well, I'm just seeing the world around me. What do I care? That all makes sense to me. We need to, you know, ready military. It's like, yes, but can you take a moment here and realize there are actual people who are impacted directly by this, that you're basically calling them not necessarily, as you had said, a burden, which no, that's not true. And so it's so valuable for you to have your perspective on this too. And that's again why I really appreciate you coming on and just being able to share. You're a person. You have concerns that are direct about this. So what can we do, I guess, if you know, for anything that we watching or sharing this video or anything, what can we do if there's anything other than contact our Congress people to say, no, this is bunk, basically?
Well, that's a big one. I know we always kind of reference that. We always go to that option. Yeah, call your Congress people and seriously call them, because right now the NDAA is going to be going through Congress, and this is like the first. As a trans person, this is one microcosm issue that is important to me, but there are others, right? Like I still, as a transgender person, I still don't enjoy full civil rights in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Their protections for gender identity aren't written into the Civil Rights Act. So depending on what state I live in, I might not, I could get fired from my job and my boss could literally tell me you're fired because you're trans. And I would just have to, like, sadly pack everything and leave and have no legal recourse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's call your Congress people, tell them that you want to make sure that equality is a primary, is back on the menu for primary things that this country cares about. It should have been, it should still be, but yeah, important legislation like the NDAA is where you get stuff like this done.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that too. And Kim, thanks for watching too. Kim Gaskill is one of my friends who in the live stream community, and she's always around for great backing up and stuff. So I appreciate her. But yeah, and really, I think I love that you were trying to focus too on the optimism part of it. That if anything, I mean, if we can come away from these last 8 months with nothing else, is that it's really, I think, opening eyes and possibly mobilizing people to say, oh, hang on, I don't want that kind of world where you know, just telling certain people they can't have these things now. Where are, you know, this isn't making anything great again. You know, it's
right.
it's going backwards. And so if anything, this could be, you know, finally getting people mobilized to say, oh, no, I will. Let me go look up where I can contact my congressperson. And I'll make sure, Kim, I don't know if you're watching too, if you don't mind looking up. I know there's a website out there that will let people basically enter their zip code and they can then see how to contact the representatives. But we'll make sure we add that link in here too, because that's important information to have for any issue, but particularly this one, because it's right on the docket. I mean, just with that amendment being attached to the NDA, we need to make sure that they, you know, our representatives know that, well, you need to represent us, all of us, and get this thing done so that we protect, you know, our neighbors, because you're our neighbors, right? And we need to all stand for each other. Yeah. Well, Emily, thank you. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with, just as we think about this issue, or just you know, transgender people in general? Because again, I feel like I know in my circles, and I even have been educated by you just in the last week, you know, about how to best serve you through whatever voices you talked about, the platform you have that some people can't speak for themselves. What can we do? What can we do for you?
We're just people, you know. I wake up, I spend an hour and a half getting ready for work every day. It's much more time than I had spent before in my previous life. I get ready the same way everybody else does in the morning. I know there's a lot of things that are very personal because politics is personal, but equality should be universal. It doesn't matter if it's this issue or if it's, you know, Muslims in the military, or just being nice to your neighbors. We kind of, to me, making America great again is restoring, just being a friendly country to everybody who wants to be here, including trans people, including Muslims, including Black people. You know, everybody who lives here deserves to have a shot at contributing and living in the country. So that's just, as a general rule, I would just say that.
Yeah. And I see Fiona had come on too. I don't know if you want to speak to her or not, or we can have her connect, you know, just tweet at you later. But she was asking if we'd spoken about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I think you alluded to a little bit earlier on, and obviously that didn't really didn't do much for transgender people or gay people, that, you know, and you talked about a little bit about how they got rid of that so you guys could come out and just live and be. And here we are again, kind of drawing that back again.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation because you didn't really see the same sort of, I describe it as the rug being pulled out from under you, and it didn't really happen with Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah.
It's so far been gone for good. So when you lure somebody out, and I know people who are in the situation where they now don't know if they should try and transition or if they should, you know, try and get out. It's even more confusing because we don't really know if their contracts are going to get re-upped, and it's just it's the uncertainty that makes this the most difficult part of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that end, again, let's do what we can. And speaking to anyone watching this too, let's do what we can to not make this so uncertain, and just be very certain about contacting our representatives. But it is more than that. I think it's being the willingness to treat each other equally, to treat each other as human beings. We all live and breathe. I'm not trying to quote JFK, but here we go. We all live and breathe the same air, and we need to remember that there are differences. There are bound to be, because we're human beings, but at our hearts, we're still human, and that's how we need to treat each other. So I will endeavor to do that. And again, we'll get that link out. Thank you, Kim. Kim, I knew you'd come to the rescue. Kim posted the link for how to find your representatives. So please, everybody, click on that link, share the show, share the link, and let's get some action going. And bookmark that link, because I'm sure this will not be the last time that we need it. That's right. Well, Emily, thank you so much for, again, taking some time late on a Wednesday night for being on the Concealer Chronicles. And I will connect with you in a little bit in the lobby as I close out the show, but I just want to give our audience a chance to say goodbye and thank you to you. So appreciate you being on the show this evening. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll pop you down in the lobby real quick as I just wrap things up. Everyone, thank you for watching the show. I know we're just getting kicked off episode 2, but questions are awesome. Comments are awesome. The content is gold. This should be a really important show. Each of these, I want them to have some levity sometimes, but we do have to tackle the very serious and timely topics. And this was one of them. And Emily was amazing to be on the show tonight. So I'm so pleased with that. I want to remind you that next week, we are going to talk breast cancer. And in probably the most direct terms possible, Michelle Hoagland created a Facebook group called the Boob Report. When she was diagnosed, it was a year ago, I think 2 days ago, it was the year anniversary that she got the call that she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She since went through several surgeries and is a survivor. And she's going to come on and talk about that experience. So many of us are touched by cancer, and we need to know how that experience is. I'm sure it's just got to turn your world topsy-turvy to get told that and be like, okay, here's a new world for me. So that'll be next week, 9 p.m. Eastern again here on the Concealer Chronicles, and we'll have the link up shortly in a little bit and get that scheduled. But thank you all for watching. I so appreciate it. Please make sure you do share the show. Tag a friend if you're watching this in a replay. Make sure you tag a friend who should see this too and could share it out as well. Nothing but good education, good people, good knowledge as we share these stories of women in charge, right? So with that, I will bid you all farewell, and we'll see you next Wednesday on the Concealer Chronicles. Thank you so much for watching.